I now have the pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Pedro Comissário, Ambassador at the Permanent Mission here in Geneva, Ambassador at the Permanent Mission of Mozambique.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like first of all to express my delegation's satisfaction in seeing you presiding over the deliberations of the fourth session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. We are very confident that under your leadership, our work will be crowned with success. I would also like to commend the Special Representative of the United Nations, Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, for our tireless efforts and steadfast leadership in the implementation and monitoring of the global agenda for disaster risk reduction. We equally thank the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction Office for all the support bestowed on our countries and regions in this domain. Mr. Chairman, we believe that together we will succeed in taking stock of the lessons and experiences learned to bring about a post-2015 IOGO framework for action that is in line with the overall objectives of development. Mozambique is a country highly vulnerable to climate disasters, such as tropical cyclones, floods, and droughts, and earthquakes, due to its geographical location on the Indian Ocean shores along the African Rift, prone to severe climate variations. In our country, weather-related disasters are cyclical, frequent and extensive, causing huge human losses and widespread damage and annual economic losses in excess of 1% of our GDP. And in the most critical years, like 2000 and 2013, disasters cost the country about 20% of our gross domestic product. It is within this context that the government has been taking action to strengthen our ability to prevent disaster response preparedness with the active involvement of the Community Action Center. We strive to boost resilience of our economy and local communities to disasters. We are also engaged in the implementation of programs aimed at the expansion of early warning systems with a view to heighten early detection capability, enhance preparedness, and ensure timely response to hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, and in times of food emergency. We managed to increase the number of local committees for disaster management in the country from 588 in 2011 to 667 in 2013. And we also increased the number of members of those committees from 7,300 in 2011 to more than 9,200 in 2013. Regarding prevention measures, we have invested significantly in the improvement of land use planning by encouraging local communities to build their houses in safer areas, far from the riverbeds. Simultaneously, in the urban areas, We are promoting this resettlement of communities at risk in the neighborhoods, properly planned and equipped with facilities. Consequently, since 2009, we no longer spend resources or effort with search and rescue operations, at least in the valleys of Zambezi River and Save River, despite the occurrence of significant floods. Encouraged by this experience, we extended the program to other river basins, and we are in the process of resettling about 14,000 families affected by floods this year, 2013. The diversification of sources of income and the introduction of new technologies for agricultural production and agro-processing, the expansion and improvement of the planning and implementation of social protection programs targeting vulnerable groups living in risk areas allowed for a 35% reduction in the number of people depending on food assistance. In this connection, I'm pleased to state that as a result of these government policies and actions, hunger is no longer a cause of death in Mozambique for nearly a decade now. The consequences of the disaster risk reduction programs in Mozambique are, however, the loss of $500 million to disaster-related damages, equivalent to 12% of Mozambique's 2013 state budget. This means that the level of vulnerability of our people, of our communities, of the economy in general, is still very, very high. We are faced, therefore, with an urgent need for additional efforts to boost the resilience of our infrastructures and productive capacity to disasters. This will entail measures to reduce the risk from floods, landslides, and coastal erosion. With these goals in mind, Mr. President, we enacted laws and adopted policies that from our national platform for disaster risk reduction. Among them, I wish to highlight the following: the accession of Mozambique to the pilot program on climate resilience, PPCR, with the framework of the climate investment funds, with a view to mobilizing resources for implementing pilot transformational investments and climate resilient agriculture, roads, protection for coastal cities, land management, and water resources management, and hydrometeorology services. The second measure is the approval by the government of the first proposal for a disaster management act, which will create a balance between a response and emergency management and disaster risk reduction. It also establishes responsibilities for all levels of administration and governance. The third measure is the inauguration of the triennial cycle of sectorial and institutional reforms, 2012 to 2014, the first such program in Africa, in order to effectively integrate climate resilience and reducing the risk of environmental disasters, disaster management, agriculture, and roads. And the fourth measure is approval of the national strategy for climate change adaptation and mitigation. With this instrument, climate and disaster resilience become a matter of national priority, whose implementation will require, inter alia, the creation of a national coordination capacity, adequate research, knowledge management, and additional funding mobilization. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Mozambique is currently in the process of designing its national monitoring and evaluation system for climate change. We envisage an instrument that will not only assess the degree of progress in the implementation of our national strategy for adaptation and mitigation of climate change, but also, and above all, one that can help us to assess the degree of contribution of climate and disaster resilience to the development and the poverty reduction goals. With this in mind, it is our expectation that the new IOGO framework for action will explicitly include measurable indicators that will help the planet, regions, and countries to quantify to what extent resilience contributes to the attainment of sustainable development goals. As a nation that cherishes and upholds the sanctity of life, we would like to see a new IOGO framework for action that categorically declares death by disasters unacceptable. We would like to see a framework that appeals to a global commitment to the eradication of deaths caused by those disasters. In our view, the future indicators should express the commitment to reduce to zero the number of deaths by preventable disasters until 2030. We believe that only acting collectively and in accordance with the IOGO framework for action, we will succeed in promoting sustainable development and resilience to disasters, and in doing so, we will vindicate the human dignity and the value of human life. I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your presentation.